The idea of travelling to Pakistan seems so hard from India. And this was in a very kind of a time when all the advice that I was receiving was, don't go to Pakistan. I went anyway. And it was just so beautiful and so shocking to arrive in this much maligned country. This great river which gave India its name and of course is now mostly in Pakistan. Well, it doesn't even flow out towards the sea. It became a very different book. It became a book of an ecological lament, really, for a great natural resource. You know, there's divided families, divided land, divided culture, and they, if politicians weren't involved, soldiers weren't involved, they would love each other. There is something, I felt like I wasn't a spiritual person when I embarked on this book, but somehow by the end, I was definitely a river worshipper. Buddhism, of course, has this new technology in terms of the dissemination of Buddhism, which Hinduism hadn't used, which was writing. Like, why are the stories so often those of men? I mean, I think look into your history, look at how history has been told and think, is there another way of telling this history?
I'm Angeline Ondaatje on Confluence.
I'm Albinia on Confluence.
Hi, today we are diving into the worlds of rivers, myths, and hidden histories with the incredible Alice Albinia. Alice is a British author whose work has taken her from the icy peaks of Tibet to the wild islands of Britain's coast. Her debut, Empires of the Indus, won hearts and awards worldwide, and with her latest, The Britannias, which has just won the Michael Jacobs Award.
So that's for my next piece of work, in fact.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, which is about guano in South America.
Oh, great.
But I haven't written it yet. It's one of those amazing prizes that.
So you've lived in Delhi,
yes,
and you've explored South Asia deeply. Are you already starting to see connections between the themes of water, myth, forgotten histories, travel with Sri Lanka's landscape, maybe irrigation tanks, the Mahavali River, the ocean? Yeah,
all those things. I mean, there was a very interesting talk on the maritime history of Sri Lanka, which is a very ancient water harvesting technique, I understand.
Yes, so they're actually predate even the Greco-Roman time. But you're talking about the one, I think, with Dr. Sanjeeva. Yeah.
Yes.
He's explored the pre-colonial, the water, the fact that, we were taught in school that, the Portuguese came and the Dutch came and then the British came and then nothing else existed before. But he's explored the vast amount of maritime knowledge. That,
yes, and it's going to be so interesting and rich and complex, I imagine.
The book I loved was The Empire of the Indus, the story of a river. You traveled the full length of the Indus from the Arabian Sea to Pakistan. Can you just tell us a bit about what drew you to the particular river and how that extraordinary journey, how did you actually start this journey?
Mm-hmm. I think it was living in India. I was there just at this very difficult moment where it was the first BJP government. There was a lot of contesting of Indian history, the secular interpretations of history. At the same time, in Pakistan, I remember being at work in Delhi for the Center for Science and Environment, and I remember the moment there was a kind of flurry through the kind of the room of all these journalists, and it turned out that Musharraf had just taken over in Pakistan, so there was a military coup next door, and the idea of the idea of traveling to Pakistan seemed so hard from India. There were so many barriers physically and emotionally for people, but it was that was one idea in my head, and then I remember sitting in my Barsati flat in Delhi, very very hot summer's evening. And I was reading the Hindustan Times, and there was an article about the Indus and about this great river which gave India its name, and of course is now mostly in Pakistan. And so it was really that irony of partition history, the way that history is told, how these things unfold, and what does the river? How does the river navigate all these different human tribulations. And I thought I was embarking on a work of history. I went to SOAS and did an MA in South Asian history. And then I finally took a flight to Karachi. And this was in a very kind of a time when all the advice that I was receiving was, don't go to Pakistan. And I went anyway. And it was just so beautiful and so shocking to arrive in this much maligned country, find all this really wonderful people, hospitality, love, and to discover that the river itself was not the mighty Indus of the reports that I've been reading, the historical reports, but was a much diminished entity as it flows out. Well, it doesn't even flow out towards the sea. And it became a very different book. It became a book of an ecological lament, really, for a great natural.
When you talk about
resource.
the places, the communal baths, the goddesses, the gods, the very important kind of individuals that have become leaders now, spiritual leaders for communities. Have you looked at any of the, during your research, did you have you started uncovering the Buddhist trade links between like the Indus and the Gandhara region and Sri Lanka? Because for us, it's really interesting. It seems like the Gandhara civilization was a very Buddhist civilization, and in Sri Lanka also we seem to have preserved Buddhism more, in a different manner to the way India and Nepal have. Have you looked at links?
Yes, no, there's a whole chapter on the Gandharan heartland. It's now in the place it is now in Pakistan is the Swat Valley, and it was when Buddhism exploded outside India and took itself to these second sacred places, really, in China, in what's now Pakistan, in Sri Lanka. And you do get still these, well, when I was traveling there, these kind of brave Buddhist tourists would turn up in the Swat Valley to see the remnants of this Buddhist homeland outside India and Nepal. It's also a very, there was the Bamiyan Buddhas had been destroyed in Afghanistan, and I don't think the pictures are in the edition that's
unfortunately
here.
Not
Yes.
in the edition that is in that we have read. But
so I ended that chapter with going to this valley where there was a Maitreya Buddha had been carved, really, really beautiful in the side of the rock. And it was like a kind of mini Bamiyan Buddha. And then, of course, the valley was taken over by militants. And the first thing they did was they went, I think it was 2007, just as the book was going to
Did you think the book would be received so well? I mean, you've won an amazing amount of awards, including the Somerset Maugham Award. How were you surprised at how powerfully it resonated with readers around the world?
Well, I mean, it's always such an honor, and it was a huge delight, and it was a surprise. When you're writing a book, and a book like this, it did require a little bit of craziness, a bit of madness in terms of the things I was determined to do, the travels, the research, the archives, the interviews, the oral histories. It was flowing in my blood, for all those years. And so you don't think about the reception of a book while you're writing it. And yeah, it was a real delight to see how it was received in Pakistan and in India. And of course, you see there the poignant history of these two nations, where they, there's divided families, divided land, divided culture, and they, if politicians weren't involved and soldiers weren't involved, they would love each other. And it's so sad.
Well, for me, it kind of finally explained to me. I have a lot of Sindhi friends, and I never understood how they're such a cohesive group of people. I mean, they're scattered all over the world, and they seem to have the same spiritual leaders. But I didn't understand their history until I read your book. So thank you for that. Honestly,
and they're here in Petta Market, apparently.
Oh,
the
yes,
Sindhis.
yes.
Yeah.
So they're here. They're
Yeah.
in. They're mostly. In India a lot, but they're all over the world.
Yeah.
But they are connected to their area still, even though most of them aren't even allowed to go back.
Yeah.
And even if they do, they get a very short
visas.
visas
Yeah.
to just be in a particular area.
Mm-hmm.
So from the Empire of the Indus, you jumped into Leela's book.
Mm-hmm.
This is a book. So I must confess, I haven't read it, but it's a book on contemporary Delhi, and it reimagines the elements of Mahabharata, and Ganesh is a mischievous narrator. What prompted you to go from the non-fiction to a fiction, and what did the Mahabharata feel like? To play what the right to the epic play with? How did you bring that into the story?
Well, for me, it was very clear that it was a kind of psychologically, it was, and creatively, writing these books together, the non-fiction and the fiction, which they come together specifically at Mount Kailash, which is where in the epic, the sage Vyasa asks the god Ganesh to write down the epic, which until then has been an orally transmitted text. And I became very interested in why, became obsessed with why on earth this strange interlude is in the epic. And I decided that it was to do with Buddhism and Hinduism, the interaction of Buddhism and Hinduism. Buddhism, of course, has this new technology in terms of the dissemination of Buddhism, which Hinduism hadn't used, which was writing. Buddhism, I think, is the Buddhist holy texts are written down before the Hindu holy texts are written down. Until then, everything.
But are then those also much later than the period of the actual Lord Buddha?
Yes, much later. But I think that in a way, in the Mahabharata, you have a response to this innovation of writing, which is so successful, and you see it in later when I come to the Britannias. And how does Christianity, which is a completely foreign religion, spread so fast through some cold northern island, like the collection of islands which now make up Great Britain, and it's through writing. So it's this. It's one of those technological shifts that you see in history, and I think the passage with Ganesha is he takes his trunk and he uses it as a pen, and he receives the dictation of Vyasa, and it's one of those moments where it's like the mobile phone of ancient India. Something changes.
He's a cheerful god, isn't he?
Yes,
and he's a playful one.
Well, he's the god of obstacle removers. So, and the god of beginnings, the lord of beginnings. So, yeah.
So in Sri Lanka, the Ramayana is woven into our landscape, into traditions. The Ravana's temple. Even places there are a lot of places that have Ravana's name or significance. How do you see these ancient epics continuing to shape identity, family dynamics, and society, not just all over Southeast Asia? They don't seem to be going away, right? We still seem to be deeply connected to these epics.
I suppose it's every generation has its own new interpretation of what it thinks the epics are doing. There have been wonderful kind of rewritings of the Mahabharata. Obviously, there are, you see in India, a kind of in certain political hands, an abuse of what those epics can mean, and what those stories can mean, the people that they're focusing on, and I guess it's this is our heritage, and it's I think it's amazing that the oral transmission lasted in this part of the world. Where I'm from. If we had, we have some stories that have come down to us, but because there was this colonization and recolonization, and as I was saying this morning, an attempt to wipe out a whole class of oral storytellers, spiritual guardians of the culture, the pre-Roman culture in Europe. Everything was lost, and so it's really amazing that despite all the onslaughts of various forms of colonialism and change, that these stories were retained. So that's just people learning.
Yeah, but even in
poetry.
Europe, there it seems to be the oral traditions took so long to actually be written down, and there's no way to actually date. I mean, even with the Ramayana, I think there's no real date. And I mean, Valmiki's, the names of the people who actually written them also, there's so little that's known about them.
I mean,
right?
but you have to imagine centuries of people, probably men, learning these texts and passing it on to each other. And I think this is something that we, at least in the West, this form of memory, memorizing large chunks of text. I mean, I remember being in Delhi and going to the madrasa and seeing these children rocking backwards and forwards, learning the Quran. I mean, that's how it would have been, I suppose.
Yes, of course. So you
which we
talk
don't
about
have
the
anymore.
men who write history. So in your
Yes.
book, Quen, you imagine a matriarchal archipelago of the British coast. A world of female power, ecological awareness, and ancient myth. What inspired you to go into the speculative vision after your deep dive into the rivers and this the whole, spiritual journey with Leela's book?
So my first two books have been written in the company of rivers, the Indus and then the Yamuna. I knew that having written these two books, I wanted to write something about Britain, where I was born. And there wasn't an obvious Indus. And I spent a long time looking at a map of the British Isles. I literally sat in my studio staring at this map, thinking, what's my pilgrimage route here? What's my silsila? How am I going to find my way through? And then the mainland faded out, and I just saw these little islands in the ocean all around Britain. And that was really my way through. And once I'd found that it was the islands that I wanted to focus on, there was a kind of time of crisis for me in writing the Britannias, and Quen is really the product of that, in that I realized that I've been doing all this research in Shetland and Orkney, looking at the Roman soldiers coming to Britain, the Druid response, and then the kind of Christianization of those islands and the monks. And it became a story. I realized that I was writing a very male story. And that was a crisis for me. Like, why are the stories so often those of men? And there's a logical answer to that, which is that we do live in a patriarchal world, and that men are used to speaking up, and that women are used to listening to men. And once I'd realized that, I then began looking back at the same myths and histories and texts and epics that I'd been looking at before, but looking for the women, and where are the women? And I found, like a piece of magic, that the women were often on these islands, either in myth or in reality. They'd often been taken themselves away from the patriarchal mainland, and they'd found these small islands to create independent states for themselves and other women. And that was just something that came up through different genres in British history. It jumps languages, it jumps epochs. It's a really, really ancient thread. And that was really my silsila. That took me all the way back.
Inspired lots of people with that book. I mean, it's apart from the whole historical question, the fact that you address the gender imbalance and the stories of women that need to be written. Yesterday's sessions were, I think it was a common thread, I felt almost, and yeah, good. And then from there you go into the Britannias. You kayaked and sailed around Britain's islands, rediscovering hidden women's histories. I mean, in all your epic books that you've done, like the Indus, you've actually had a huge challenge physically. How did that? I mean, I was always wondering, even when I was reading the book on Indus, how did she do it? I mean, wasn't it physically really grueling? I mean, how did you mentally prepare? Because you didn't know where, this would take you to, right? So I think the most grueling thing about writing the Indus book was
was everybody's paranoia. The paranoia of people in Britain, totally matched by the paranoia of people along the Indus. And I had to make a conscious decision. And it was during Ramadan, so I was fasting. And I said to myself, you're in this country, you've met really wonderful people. You can be as paranoid as the kind of, almost like the state apparatus wants you to be, or you can just trust in human instinct, trust in friendship, and get on with writing your book. And that was what took me through, really. And then it's a matter of getting really dirty and sweaty and walking a lot. And you can swim in the river when you've been walking for hours and hours. Just go and swim in the Indus. And there is something. I felt like I wasn't a spiritual person when I embarked on this book, but somehow by the end, I was definitely a river worshipper.
And you did come across female saints, traders, and a lot of things were you consciously looking for, the forgotten female histories, especially in the Britannias? Was that a part of your thought process when you were writing the book, and also when you were doing your journey?
Definitely with the Britannias, but as I say, it came to my kind of self-recrimination, to my horror about myself. It came as a kind of almost like it was something I had to relearn. I did this year or so of research and assessed it and realized that I was missing so much because I hadn't been focusing on the female stories, because they're not the ones that are promoted. And I think probably it was something that I learned from, traveling as a woman through some of those places on the banks of the Indus. I kind of, there was a sense in which I was and wasn't a woman, in that I was a Western woman. So I could.
Did you feel scared anytime, like where you felt unsafe? Or?
Not really. I felt probably most scared in Tibet because of the mountains and the rain and the snow and the huge journey that we had to do. And that was also, I'd come from Ladakh and I'd entered this Buddhist world where the whole social fabric was so different. I'd been in a very, very patriarchal world till then. And then discovering the kind of social arrangements of Buddhist Ladakh, and indeed the Drokpas in Tibet. The concept of polyandry, which has been very much maligned through history, mostly by colonizers, but is so interesting in terms of a woman taking more than one husband. And it's logical. You just do the maths. It keeps the population down. You preserve resources. So clever, and such an impact in how women are viewed, because obviously women are then at the center of everything. and I had to learn that in Ladakh. So I carried that through with me to the next projects, and I'll carry it on into the books I'm writing afterwards.
What are your plans for the next? I'm sure listeners would like to know what you're going to do, because it's been an interesting journey. But
well, I have 2 children, and they were often complaining at me that they didn't want to read my books. So I've written a book for children.
Oh, lovely!
It's called Once Upon an Island, and it's an atlas of islands beginning in this very, very south of the world, in Chiloé, in Chile, and going all the way north, ending up in Canada in the Arctic Circle in Baffin. And again, it's there's an interview with an island woman. And I'm drawing out stories of women, and then my next big project is the one I'm immersed in now, and that was the Fondation Gabo Award, which was so amazing to win just last month, for a book that I haven't yet written, but I'm embarking on.
How does that happen? How do you win
one of those
award for something?
For Empires of the Indus, I won a similar award, and it is actually life-changing. I won an award before.
So does it help financially?
It helps financially. It helps with, I guess, with the sense of kind of that somebody else is connecting with you in this project. You're not alone. You're so alone as a writer.
Yeah, but it's an endorsement also, right, for what you're doing. And
it's, for me, I'm writing about now South America. And so what I'm looking at specifically is this moment in 19th. It's mid-19th century, high colonialism, it's the Victorian era, it's racism in terms of Britain's reaction to the rest of the world. And I'm familiar with that in terms of India, British India, but there was a whole kind of band of merchants who went to South America without any of the state apparatus, and therefore and took things from South America. In this case, I'm looking at guano, which is the poo of seabirds, which had been used in the Andes for 2 millennia, and was suddenly discovered by Europe in the 1850s when they were having an agricultural crisis. They began raiding their graveyards for bones and Napoleonic battlefields, and as a way of nourishing the earth.
Just the phosphates and all of that.
Exactly. And so these islands off Peru, the coast of Peru, have been pooed on by seabirds. Europe discovered this miracle fertilizer, and it's before they then synthesize before the Haber-Bosch method in, I think it's 1909. So it's a window of time when Europe is exploiting a South American resource. And I'm going to be writing a book about earth and fertilizer and soil and the connection between South America.
Well, these wars seem to be going on still.
Yes, exactly. I think we are in a new Victorian age in a way.
Yes. But I mean, the fight for minerals.
Yes,
seems
exactly.
To be
I mean, Chile
at the heart of a lot of things.
Yes, Chile has. So Europe took.
So you were talking about writing for children. I think it's such a challenge to get children to read. So I think it's wonderful that you've actually given them something that's not, a rehash of something else. I mean, you're actually actively, researching something new. Mm-hmm. Probably adults might read it too.
Oh, yes. It's supposed to be from 7 to infinity. But when I had children, having completely ignored children from the moment I left home, I'm the eldest of 5 children, and kind of I look back on my travels through India and Pakistan, and I can't even visualize a single child. I think I just blanked them as an entity, and then had my own children and began reading to them. And you read The Very Hungry Caterpillar 1,000 times maybe, and I learned such a new respect for children's literature because it is so read and reread and reread. It's almost like the kind of Sanskrit epic of modern times is how many times we read the same books to children, because they love the stories coming back again. And they
go back to them. I have children in my 20s and a teenager, and they still talk about the books that, I read them as kids. So I think they do
part of a kind of, it's part of our brain formation as a species, that moment, as I was talking about earlier, where you stop being purely oral and you become literate. What does that do to the brain? And it's a kind of probably a trauma and a delight. It's both things.
Yes. So do you have any kind of advice or anything to say to our young writers, readers, especially in with regards to the rivers, the islands, the myths? We were talking about the whole concept of the waterways, even with the ancient ones and the ocean ones. Any thoughts that you could share to inspire young writers and readers? Because there's a whole community of young writers. Mm-hmm. We have the Gratian Prize, and we have some amazing. I judged it about 2 years ago. Surprised at how much is being written in English language, mm-hmm. and a lot of young people. Mm-hmm. So it's a growing community, and any kind of thoughts for them?
I mean, I think look into your history, look at how history has been told, and think: is there another way of telling this history? I think the name of this Confluence is such a beautiful metaphor for rivers flowing together, different channels of myth and oral history and storytelling, and objects in your museums and in your houses and in your villages, and the natural history as well. I think all the heritage that you have on this island, which has received so much influence from the outside world, but is also logically is its own microcosm. Yeah. As islands often are.
We have, because we've had like this 300-400 years of colonial rule, a lot of what was written and what was, our history was what was documented by, starting from the Portuguese, and it was, obviously translated. And we were told to believe that's our history. But I see that younger people are actually questioning that, going back to things that have been, not only forgotten, but we have a lot of archaeology. So that, there's a lot of destruction in the archaeology, but there's still a lot that speaks volumes. So.
Yes, and go to those archaeological sites. Think about language as well. Language is so interesting. The father tongues that you all grew up speaking, how that interacts with English as a global language, how it inflects it, how you can bring those languages in, I suppose, into the forms of storytelling that you want to explore.
Any book recommendations for young writers?
I think just read as widely as possible. Read what's being written now. Read what was been ancient texts. Look again. Ask your grandmothers and grandfathers what they were reading, and it's so. I always ask people what whenever I travel anywhere. What have you read recently that really touched you? I think that's how we're a community of readers and writers, and a kind of, I think of a kind of roaming, maybe a kind of, in terms of Sri Lanka, a kind of a maritime, a ship full of books that's been sailing around the coast of Sri Lanka and then being carried upstream and passed from hand to hand. I've been signing my books today that have some of them have been really well loved, have been covered with kind of rain and sunspots and passed through many, many different people's minds, and it's really wonderful.
I think just the fact that people are still buying a physical book and reading it is a miracle.
Amazing.
Especially when you have people who are just so fixated on their devices.
Yeah, it's really, really, really heartwarming.
And like you were saying, the brain processes, I think, a written document in that you're actually feeling and touching differently from something that is electronic.
Yes.
It's just... There has to be a difference.
There definitely is a difference, and maybe there could be. Maybe in Sri Lanka, you're able to meet outside, and you could have readings, and I'm sure you do that already. But maybe that could be a new way through this kind of crisis we have of the digital interface, or maybe bringing them together and accepting that screens are part of our lives now, but we have to see how that interweaves. The confluence of screens and books and oral storytelling would be so beautiful to observe.
Alice, thank you so much. This has really been wonderful.
I've
learned a lot from reading your book. I'm looking forward to reading Quen, and I think I've reserved a copy of Britannia.
Oh, good.
Yes. So, and if I have questions, I'll certainly be emailing you. And I'm going to look up those pictures. I was like thinking, this could be just my copy. I got a lemon.
No, I'm going to send it to you.
I went to the bookstore and I said, my copy didn't have the illustrations, and hopefully I'll look them up on the website.
Yeah, well, I will send them to you, but I could also write to my publishers, because there were some beautiful, the picture of the Buddha in the Swat Valley, which was blown up, is really, I'd love you to see it.
Yes, I think when you're, I love illustrations in a book. I think it kind of, you're imagining a lot, but then also when you see something,
yes,
it kind of, it's a moment. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you
so much.